that balance sheet, that's all debt. Do we never have to pay back debt? Do we never have to service debt? Do we never have to roll that debt over? So as long as they can retain the confidence in the public, then they can grow that debt to levels that we see in like Venezuela and in other parts of the world. We've seen in Zimbabwe.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we begin this interview with our friend Lynette Zang, just a quick word from this interview's sponsor. Did you know that collagen may be the closest thing that we've found to a real fountain of youth? Many health experts now agree that consuming collagen is crucial to renewing and revitalizing how you look and feel. Because collagen is the most abundant protein in your body, and it essentially is the glue that holds you together. In fact, after the age of 20, people produce 12% less collagen in their skin every decade, which can lead to skin sags, wrinkles, hair getting thinner, nails losing their strength, joints becoming stiff, recovery from activity and exercise slowing, and in general, our body's just turning on us. So if you want the age-defying benefits of collagen, it's crucial to consume the 5 right types of collagen. And I'm going to leave you the link below this video, which will help explain all of it and get you the collagen you need to get your skin healthy and supple, make your hair youthful looking, support joint flexibility, strengthen nails, teeth, and gums, promote strong, healthy muscles, tendons, and ligaments, while also promoting stronger bones while supporting digestive health. So, support your health today with collagen. Click the link below. It's my favorite source for this important health supplement. All right, let's begin. Thank you so much for tuning in, friends. It's great to have you back, and it's nice to have back on the line Lynette Zang. She's one of the chief analysts over there at
ITM Trading.
ITM Trading, that's it. Chief analyst. Well, it's nice to have you back, Lynette. Happy 2020.
Absolutely. Can you believe this is going to be a very interesting year, Sean, and I'm very happy to be back here.
Well, thanks for coming back on. I know you have some concerns, quote unquote concerns about the stock markets, which I know right now, as we're having this conversation, President Trump is over at Davos talking about how great the U.S. economy is. And that's great because I do think it would be in the hellhole if the witch was in the White House. I think we'd be part of a new Green Deal, and we'd be part of a UN Agenda 20 plan and the Paris Accords to gut our economy and give up all our current forms of energy in the name of saving the planet from climate change, something that President Trump is addressing in his speech over at Davos. Let me do this screen share quickly so people can see this headline. Trump slams impeachment hoax and climate change prophets of doom during Davos address. One thing I do like about this president is he's a straight shooter, and he'll say the things that none of these other clowns on the left would ever say, at least as it pertains to climate change. Your thoughts on the state of the economy as we begin this conversation, Lynette?
Well, I'll tell you, I agree with the IMF, the World Bank, and the BIS that the global economy continues to slow. And while I would really like to think that everything is great here in the good old USA, because obviously we all love our country, the reality is that 42% of the people cannot pull together $400 in an emergency. That's worse than it was last year when it was $500. So I'm not really so sure that things are as great here as everybody would like them to be. I'll say that.
Right. Well, the unemployment rate is low, and it's, I don't think, ever been lower in the African American community. And so I think that's really good news. But to your point, if you're making even $15 an hour, which, isn't terrible, it's above minimum wage by quite a bit, it's hard to pull together enough flexible income. It's hard to save. It's hard to make that $400 come together in an emergency. So as the stock markets hit new highs and President Trump is excited about that, that's really only helping the richest of the rich, because most people aren't all in on the stock markets, and a lot of people got shook out during those last few corrections, the one back in 2008, for instance.
There's also something that you commented on in unemployment, and it's really interesting because if we broaden our view a little bit, what you're finding is that unemployment is near all-time lows or at all-time lows in many, many countries. In Europe, for example, and yet people are hungry, they're starving. So I don't really know. The job sector has definitely shifted to lower paying jobs and more service sector jobs. And if the stock market is counting on earnings increasing to keep supporting their stock prices, well, who's going to be able to buy?
Well, yeah, and one of the concerns I have, and President Trump is really forced to address it and did in the Davos speech. He mentions making investments into AI. I mean, if you think about where we're going to be in the next 10, 15, 20 years, I'm afraid a lot of those jobs are going to be gone. I mean, you can
Yes.
walk into a Walmart right now and they make you check yourself out. So all of those jobs are going away, and there's going to be a move to robotics, even greater than
Yes.
what we've already seen. So I do worry about the future of the economy. And then that gets into the whole area. See, because I think the elite are concerned about it too. So they've started to talk about universal basic income. They need to
Oh,
try to
yes.
pacify the masses before this huge next shift happens. And
Yes.
do you want to
I
talk a little
agree
bit
with
about
that.
that? Yeah.
Oh, I agree with that, really, 100%. And I think that goes to the movement that we're also seeing in corporations, where they're starting to say, oh, we need to think about what's happening on a social level and make sure that everything is okay socially, because their position at the top is in jeopardy. Keep in mind the whole fiat money, and fiat is government money. This whole system is based upon confidence. It's a con game. It's easy and cheap to push a button and create all sorts of new products that they then go out and sell, that really don't take a whole lot to create, because they're intangible, they're formulas. And I absolutely, I mean, we've seen that the loss of jobs in the service sectors in the lower sections. I mean, once we have autonomous driving, what's going to happen to all those Lyft and Uber drivers and all of those drivers? What's going to happen to
Yeah.
them? They're going to be out of the job. And a lot of those people have already come down from higher paying positions, and maybe even some more secure positions. So, yeah, that's what they are. They're talking about basic universal income, and they're also talking about just flooding the system with money, which is what they're doing, actually. But now maybe they'll share some of the wealth. But what does that do? The easier money is to get, the less value that it has. That's
Right.
a pretty clear thing to see.
Well,
If
we're
you
going to
look at it.
we'll quantify what you just said here in a second. They're flooding the system with
Mhm.
money. We're going to show that here in 1 second, because what we like to do on this channel is stay rooted in reality. So
Yes.
the reality about a stock market hitting all-time highs, all-time new highs every week and every month, that's terrific, but what does it really mean? We're going to get into that in a second, because as we're having this conversation here on Tuesday, the impeachment trial of the president for non-crimes is beginning. And I find it amusing because this president is literally being impeached for non-crimes, for simply asking the folks over there in Ukraine to at least look into the potential criminality of Joe Biden and his son. And for that, they want to hang him in the town square. Meanwhile, Nadler and other Democrats are saying if there are witnesses called, it can't be Hunter Biden.
Anybody like Hunter Biden who has no information about any of that is not a relevant witness.
Hunter Biden is off the table. So they literally are trying to cover up the crimes of the Bidens while hanging this president in the town square. It's beyond the pale. That's the reality of the impeachment farce. Now, let's look at the reality of the bankers flooding the system with money. Lynette sent me this chart. Central banks provide liquidity, danger pattern. Talk about the blue line, which I believe is central banks liquidity. They're flooding the system with money. And the red line is what, Lynette?
Well, the blue line are key central bank balance sheets, and the red line is the S&P 500. And you might notice, you can see those three areas that I have circled in there, and you can see the gray bars are official recessions. That pink bar is quantitative tightening, when the central banks tried to give themselves some dry powder, which obviously that's off the table. So what I'd like to particularly you to pay attention to is those areas that I have circled where there is a shift. And then what happens after that shift. So before the crisis hit, well, the central banks were not, I mean, I'm not saying there was no money printing going on, but they weren't doing QE, where it was money for free, where they dropped the interest rates and then started to flood the system. The blue line, the central bank balance sheet to support the markets, because you can see how correlated they are, held above that red S&P 500 until we got to where the QE supposedly ended. Once the central banks tried to level that off, the markets didn't like it, and up we go again. But look at how far removed the stock market is from the central bank balance sheet now, higher than we've seen it. And remember, the QE as well as QT were all a big experiment. So my personal feeling on this, because I pay a lot of attention to patterns, and when I see patterns that shift, it is an indication. We all know how severely or I hope we all know, I guess I should say, how severely overvalued all of the stock markets are. And they'll even admit that on the talking heads on CNBC, etc. And certainly the World Bank, the IMF, the BIS, Bank for International Settlements, everybody agrees that the global economy is slowing down. This is really all about debt. When that balance sheet, that's all debt. Do we never have to pay back debt? Do we never have to service debt? Do we never have to roll that debt over? So as long as they can retain the confidence in the public, then they can grow that debt to levels that we see in like Venezuela and in other parts of the world. We've seen in Zimbabwe, but it has less and less effect the more that we do. So I think that we're in for either major melt up, but we are in for a huge correction. That is a danger pattern to me. The other two graphs that are in there are on the purchasing power of the value. So when we go to talk about people can't pull together $400, well, that $400, as we all know, buys us a whole lot less. In the meantime, even spot gold, which is Wall Street's gold, so where you see purchasing power, value maintained, the purchasing power is what affects you and me. That's the one that we should all care the most about. And you can see the constant destruction that it just goes downhill until there's virtually no value left. Officially, we're at like 0.0389 cents, and they're afraid to move it lower, which I think is really interesting. Have your prices gone up? Have your costs gone up? Of course they have. They have to, because they are attempting to inflate those debts away, but it's simply not possible. We're way past the point, because all we keep doing is adding more debt to a debt problem. You can only postpone the inevitable. You cannot solve a too much debt problem with more debt. That makes absolutely zero sense. Just like these markets at these levels, nosebleed levels, make absolutely no sense when we're inside of an economy that is slowing.
Right. All right. So what is the end game here? We've been asking it for a long time. Famously, I've had conversations with people in the past. What was the name of that pastor? Pastor Lindsay. I forget his name now.
Williams? Isn't it William?
I think you're right. And, he said that according to his elite friend Insider, they were going to run up the stock market to unimaginable levels. And when you thought it couldn't go any higher, it would go higher still.
Go higher.
And, that was back, I swear that was probably Dow 10,000. So I never dreamt we'd be here at Dow 30,000. I should have taken his advice and gone all in with a 3 times leveraged ETF on the. I mean, seriously, the guy was right about everything. He was right about the oil run up, and then he said they'd crash oil back down, and that's exactly what happened. And then they ran oil back up. what is the end game here? Because according to him, the end game was you need to get out of everything as soon as you see the euro go. The euro would go first and then the US dollar. But I don't know. It just seems at this point, this thing's just going to go on forever. But we know that can't be the case.
Exactly. It is never the case. It wasn't the case historically. It's not going to be the case in the future. But what they're really doing is using nominal confusion. In other words, people get married to numbers. So they see Dow going 30,000, 40,000, whatever it's going to go to. And you go, wow, isn't that great? And just like you said, boy, I should have gone all in. But during that same period of time, if you go back to that graph, look at the value that you can buy with those same, in this country, dollars. It buys you less and less and less. So even when you're looking at Zimbabwe, where I believe their stock market has moved, I think, since the first of the year, so we're 20 days in, I was looking at it this morning, it's up 32.6%. But do you really want bolivars? Bolivar, you can't buy anything with them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's that nominal confusion piece, and that's the end game. Keep people in the system to conclude transferring their wealth. If you choose to buy the stock market, if you choose to keep your money in the stock market, that's right, cash is trash. But if you make that choice, when it crashes, what are you going to do? And who are you going to go complain to? Nobody. You made that choice. Now, granted, you were tricked into it, and that's the key piece in this confidence game that they're talking about. But, keep in mind that ultimately you can have $1 trillion times zero is still zero. Right. I don't care how you look at it. $1 trillion times zero is still zero. If there is a run on the market, don't you remember 2008 when they halted trading and all the other countries also, China's done it. I mean, they've all done it. Zimbabwe did. They halted trading for 3 months as the stock market got out of control, and then bam, lopped off those zeros, and bam, that market went all the way down to close to zero. But since the first of the year, it's up 32%. That wasn't Zimbabwe. That was actually Venezuela. Sorry about that.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You know what one of the problems is, as I see it here, because, you and I like to look at the quantifiables, and we really try to measure what's actually happening. But because of all the fraud and all of the paper and all the COMEX rigging, it's hard to really find the balance and figure out what's actually happening. Here's my point. So if the Dow is at 10,000, now it's at 30,000. We haven't seen that same run up in gold, and gold should be our barometer. Gold should be telling us about the malfeasance that's being done by these bankers, but it's not. So while gold may have gone from 1,000 to 1,500 since I talked to Lindsay Williams, the Dow has gone from 10,000 to 30,000. They continue to suppress the precious metals in the effort to camouflage what they're doing, because gold, if gold was at 3,000 or 4,000, it would be telling the world a very different message about the dollar.
Exactly. And remember, in 2011, when it threatened to breach that $2,000 mark, and then what happened? All of a sudden, a correction. Have things really gotten so much better since 2011? We were in the midst of the crisis. No. But to your point, a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. So they don't want you to realize that the currency is failing. That's that nominal confusion. Because people look at gold and they go, just like you just said, well, the Dow's gone from 10,000 to 30,000, but gold's only gone from 1,000 to 1,500. Wow, which would you rather have? I'll tell you what I would rather have. I would rather have an asset that is undervalued and in a long-term positive trend that has the broadest base of buyer, so that when I'm ready to liquidate it, there's somebody to buy it. When you're looking at the stock market right now, who's buying it? Okay, you make your deposit into your 401k, and those investors, institutional investors that are investing your money, you're the one that's going to lose the most. What are they doing? They're buying government bonds. They're buying debt. at 0 or -%. They're buying overvalued stocks. They're buying lots of derivatives, which, as we know, these are just big bets that are not liquid. They're creating a problem for all of the retirees, and we already know this is already a problem.
Yeah.
So when you say what's the end game, all of this crisis is going to justify a shift in the retirement programs. It's going to justify a shift into a new monetary system, into a new financial system.
Okay, I want to circle back to that in a second, because I had on Wayne Jett, and he believes that the new monetary system will be gold backed. There'll be a gold back replacement for the dollar, and it won't necessarily kill our purchasing power. So we'll circle back to that in a second. But just to round out this part of our conversation, I want to show you this, because I think it speaks exactly to what you're talking about. And this comes from Scott Minard over at Guggenheim Investments. He warns that global central banks are fueling a Ponzi market. He says, one of the topics that I'm focused on in Davos is the deterioration in the quality of the corporate bond markets. The disturbing trend is that despite the rally in risk assets in the prior year, the number of defaults rose by approximately 50%, according to the data from JP Morgan. Additionally, the number of distressed exchanges increased by 400%. This correlates well with our observation that the number of idiosyncratic defaults has been increasing. Ultimately, markets will need to reprice for this rising risk with increased bond spreads relative to Treasury securities.
Just to kind of add on to that, because absolutely everything that you said is accurate. And I am going to write this down, because next week I have to do a piece on the difference between the tangible reality, like real estate. I mean, honestly, real estate started to crack, the end of 2018. And, you're seeing more of that happening. And yet you have the builders at all-time highs. You have the REITs at all-time highs. The transports. Look at the transports. That actually tells you, they move goods, and they move goods around the world, and 12 months in a row, they've been in decline. And yet the transportation average is hitting new highs.
Yeah, the Baltic Dry Shipping Index just bottomed out again. So
exactly.
Yeah, so you're right about the global economy. There's evidence that the global economy is slowing. And meanwhile, the stock markets go up no matter what. It doesn't matter. Corporate earnings doesn't matter. Buybacks doesn't matter. Boeing's in the gutter. The 777 MAX is trash. Doesn't matter. Boeing stock goes up. So they're literally printing the money and putting it into the S&P 500 and the Dow and the NASDAQ. And you have to wonder, at what point does this Ponzi collapse? Because I guess if I was one of the elite and I had 15,000 shares of Amazon and 50,000 shares of Apple and I had NASDAQ stock, I might at this point want to sell. But where are you going to put the money? You're going to put the money in gold?
Yeah. Actually, the answer is yes. You put the money in an undervalued asset that is in a long-term positive trend. You know how you know it's in a long-term positive trend? If you go back to that graph on the spot market that I sent you, you will clearly see, anything is in a positive trend when you see a consistent series of higher and higher lows. Because if you keep getting higher and higher lows, that's the Fred chart where it says purchasing power value maintained. That takes us back to when we went on a fiat system. And what do you see there? You see a consistent series of higher and higher lows. It's in a positive trend. Okay, now you could say the same thing with the stock market that you're looking at, except as we've pointed out, it is so far removed from reality. And when does it end? It ends when the liquidity party ends. That's when it stops. So can they keep printing money? Of course. And like I said, my bet is that the central banks are going to have to print a whole lot more to keep the stock market buoyant. Because according to Goldman Sachs, I think in December, they were talking about the fact that they see corporate buybacks significantly lower this year. But maybe if the central banks keep printing money and giving it to the corporations for free, well, maybe they'll ramp up that buyback. The problem is when you go to liquidate, are there going to be a buyer on the other side? At this moment, the answer is yes, but that's why understanding liquidity in the markets, in other words, for every seller, you got to have a buyer. And right now, and what we've had really for most of President Trump's term, to be perfectly honest, has been a buy-side market. Because what we've also had since the crisis hit in 2008 is the rise of the ETFs, the unmanaged accounts, that are just based upon those algorithms, those formulas. So great on the way up, and you also have a concentration of stocks that are actually moving this. It's not a broad-based rally. It is your Amazons and your Facebooks and your Apples and all of that are moving so widely, but contributing less and less in terms of income to the markets. Their price action is contributing lots. Their earnings are not. They're declining.
All right. I want to show one other chart here. And I know this isn't in your wheelhouse in terms of anything that you believe in, but I just want to show this Bitcoin chart. I've been hearing for a long time, Max Kaiser and others predicting $100,000 Bitcoin. And that sounded a little bit lunatic, but given the stock to flow ratios on Bitcoin, it is following a pattern that suggests we will see $100,000 Bitcoin at some point in the future, especially with the halving coming up here in the next few months. I'm not saying Bitcoin 100,000 in the next few months. What I'm saying is that the money needs to go somewhere, and I think it will go into things like precious metals and some of these cryptocurrencies. And getting back to what Wayne Jett had to say, he predicts in 2020 or 2021 here, coming right up, we're going to see the demise of the current dollar and a rollout of a gold-backed replacement. What are your views on that? And is it possible for us not to take a huge hit to our purchasing power?
Well, okay. So first of all, I agree with him, but I don't see a fully backed by a currency fully backed by gold. But the IMF and the SDR has talked for many years about having a component of gold in that basket to stabilize. And they have to, because once we do go through the crash, nobody's going to trust the currency. I don't care which ones they are, nobody's going to trust it. So I definitely agree with him on that one. Second of all, you're right. When they create all this new money, it goes someplace. That's why you are seeing all of these things at record highs. But what was the rest of your question?
Well, the rest of the question was, one of the things I bumped on with Wayne, and I really should have pushed him a little further about it to flush it out, is his prediction that we're not going to see an 80% reduction in our purchasing power when the current dollar goes away, because he believes there's a gold-backed replacement already in the works. And I don't know. I just don't see how you lose our current dollar without taking a huge hit, because they need to wipe away all the debt, right?
Correct. Exactly. So I would not agree with him there. I would also say on the cryptocurrencies and on Bitcoin that I just was reading a Federal Reserve Bank of New York report on this over the weekend, and it was talking about the fact that the adoption and the use of it, the fundamental use of it, has not escalated like, frankly, they were hoping that it would. So could Bitcoin hit 100,000? Sure, but it's just it's like many years ago, I was a dealer in Las Vegas for a minute or two. And I used to, sometimes they would stick me on the big six, which I hated, but it was that big wheel. People have gone there, they know. And you put money down on whatever amount you want to, and then if it hits, you get paid out like 32 times or something like that. Honestly, the cryptocurrencies, the digital currencies that are out there right now, that's kind of the way I view them. They have no utility. You can't really use it even as a tool of barter, because they are simply, number one, way too volatile, and number two, there's not been enough adoption.
Well,
and remember, It's a 3%, or at least that's what they talked about. They needed a 3% adoption, and apparently that has not happened. So I kind of view them kind of like the big six. Maybe you get lucky, maybe you don't, except that if the currency has zero value, either way, you're not getting lucky, and it's your ability to liquidate. Do I think we're going to have a digital currency? 100%. Yep, I do. But if the central bankers can maintain public confidence, it will be one that they control. That's where we're going. And so it's not going to be anything that is currently out there in the normal market, because the central banks, they can control it. We've seen that in China. They can go, nope, done.
Right.
Or they can make it illegal. They can do lots of things. But no, we'll have a central bank-led cryptocurrency or digital currency. And yes, the most likely outcome is that it will have a component of gold in it, not 100% backed. And I agree with you 100%. They cannot just replace the current currency with a currency that has gold backing. The reason is because then they cannot reset all of that debt. And we have to. We can't pay it.
Right. Well, with a gold-backed currency, they could reset all the debt with a much higher gold price, right?
Well,
correct. So those of us who hold
physical
should be rewarded with a much, much higher gold price in dollars. Exactly. Hey, one last thought on Bitcoin here. With a 10-year history now on Bitcoin, I think the argument that it's, just a gamble, and I do agree with you, it's a gamble on where the price is going, but what I'm starting to see Bitcoin as being, and I know Peter Schiff hates this, is I'm starting to recognize it as digital gold in the sense that it's finite. There's only so many of them out there. And if you are one of these people with mega wealth from the stock market, if you wanted to transport that wealth easily anywhere in the world, Bitcoin is a great way to do it. And so the point I just wanted to make about Bitcoin is that these pie-in-the-sky predictions of $100,000 or higher Bitcoin, when we look at the Dow, when we look at you want to talk about liquidity, you want to talk about the practicality of owning a share of Netflix or Apple. I mean, I can't take Apple stock and walk down to Target and make a purchase with it any easier than I can with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I think, is going to allow the uber wealthy to do whatever they want with their wealth and to store it safely and to transport it anywhere in the world. And I guess that's the case I would make for that specific crypto. Litecoin has some case uses I can make for it too. You can actually use Litecoin to buy a cup of coffee and things like that at Starbucks. But your point is a good one. I mean, the IMF, the World Bank, the Rothschilds would love a cryptocurrency that they control and that would allow them to track and trace everything we do on the blockchain.
Absolutely.
That is the downside to crypto.
We're in the surveillance economy. Absolutely, we're in the surveillance economy. I do not think that any of those currencies are anonymous. That is, no. Because if they were so anonymous, it would be really, then how could China have blocked it?
Well, they can, here's the thing on Bitcoin. So your wallet,
and I'm not an engineer.
Right. All the wallets, they can see which wallets hold how much Bitcoin, but no one knows who owns those wallets. Look, we're getting into the weeds here because, you're not a super big fan of crypto. And all I've ever said is people might want to dip their foot in the pool back when Bitcoin was at 400 because, you know what? Maybe it is going to 20,000 again. Maybe it is going to 100,000. And we can see what they're doing with the Dow and the S&P and when, and the NASDAQ. And it just makes me wonder when this house of cards comes down, what are you going to have? You better have some physical silver and physical gold and maybe just a little bit of crypto as a hedge against the worst case scenario.
But here's the thing. When the dollar crashes, when nobody trusts the dollar anymore because it already has lost most of its purchasing power. Okay, so that you can't convert it like Venezuela. You can't convert it into goods or services. Okay, well, with gold and silver, which is good money, it's real money that has, again, that broad base of buyer, I can always convert it into any good, any service, or any currency at the moment that I need it for the tool of barter, and it'll hold its value. If you're converting a digital currency what are you converting it into?
Well, think of this though, and this is honest brass tacks, a concern of mine. Let's say, and I don't think this day is coming, I really don't, but let's say that things got as bad in this country as they've gotten in Venezuela, and you wanted to get out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to get your gold on an aircraft and through TSA and out of the country? You're certainly not going to get your tons of silver on an airplane and out of the country, right? Yes, you can take nominal amounts of gold through TSA probably, but you can't take millions of dollars worth of gold on a Delta flight internationally. But if you have
That's
Bitcoin,
actually inaccurate.
your
That's
Bitcoin can go with you anywhere in the world, and nobody knows how much wealth you have.
true. But that is actually a very inaccurate statement because you can do it with a very, very rare coin.
Well,
That's how you
okay.
can do it.
And there are probably very
one little
finite amounts
packet.
of those. No, you're right. But here's the thing. What if a draconian government led by people like Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, who we know would throw
Yikes.
over the bridge in the name of saving the earth from climate change, right? We know they'd got the economy in the name of this fable known as Greta's climate change.
Right.
So what's to stop them in a Venezuela type scenario from saying no gold, no silver leaves this country,
Right.
no precious metals leaves this country? Then what?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well,
And we're getting really dark here because I don't want that day to come. I don't foresee that specific scenario playing out. But again, I'm just making a case for Bitcoin as digital gold.
It is I understand your case, and it is actually quite a good case. And I would piggyback onto that case, and hence the whole point of making it in the collectible coins. Because when they do that, that's what the 1% hold for themselves. The central bankers hold bullion. So it's easy to go, nope, you can't do it because that's what history shows us. They confiscate the bullion, they make it illegal to move it. Now they may say you can only have so many ounces, right? I mean, if you're traveling internationally right now, anything above $10,000, you have to declare, right? However, if you have a coin from pre-33, it's got a face value of $20.
Mm-hmm.
You think people are educated on that at TSA? So you get a private room and you go in there and say, this is my private personal collection. And because it is a collectible, now I'm not saying they can't change the rules because they can do anything they want,
Mm-hmm.
but this is what history supports. That yes, there are definitely, I think gold is going to be confiscated. I really do. That's what history tells me. So I want the kind of gold that gives me the absolute best shot at being able to maintain my wealth and carry a large packet of wealth in a very teeny space.
Right.
And I feel a lot more comfortable because it's in my possession. I hold it, I own it, and I control it. I don't, and I understand your point to the digital currency, but it still goes through a network. You still have to convert it into something. And if it has no value, you're not going to be able to convert it into a cup of coffee. I'll be able to convert a dime into a cup of coffee.
Right. Well, again, though, as I've said, the 10-year history of Bitcoin shows us it's probably not going to zero, but we'll see. I don't know. I mean,
well, what value does it? I mean,
well,
really,
look, every fiat currency eventually goes to zero.
What's its utility?
Its utility is a storage of wealth outside the current system. So it's the same utility as an ounce of gold in your safe. It's outside the current monetary system, and it's easily transportable, transferred anywhere on Earth in really an instant. So from wallet to wallet transactions are beyond the reach of governments and essentially anonymous in that the wallets, nobody knows which wallet is owned by whom. So that's the benefit of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And I think it's a conversation we're going to have to continue to have because
I agree.
The prediction of Bitcoin's death has long been exaggerated by people like Peter Schiff, who by the way, just lost his password. So the few Bitcoin he had, he lost. But that's user error, right? So that's the Bitcoin are still out there. He just lost his password.
So let's just kind of, because I agree with you, we need to have this conversation. And, time is going to tell everything. But what is the base of buyer for the Bitcoin?
What do you mean the base of buyers? So you can open a Coinbase account and you can buy a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of Bitcoin. You could buy $10 worth of
Yes,
Bitcoin.
but how many sectors of the economy do that? How many sectors? Like, I don't use Bitcoin. I don't have any Bitcoin.
Well, how many sectors
How
of the
many
economy are buying
people?
Netflix stock or Amazon at $2,000 a share? It's really just,
True.
it's a way to hide wealth. It's a way for these banksters to take the money they're printing and hide it in the stock market, because the average guy isn't transacting in Netflix stock or Apple shares.
I agree with both of those, but going back to the physical metals, not GLD or any of the other derivative garbage, it's used in industry, it's used in medicine, it's used in art, it's used in the financial system, it's used in jewelry.
I know, but they're suppressing the price. So when we have trillions upon tens of trillions of dollars in the global economy, and they suppress the prices of gold and silver so that those precious metals don't reflect all of those outstanding fiat dollars, the whole system is a fraud and a charade. And I'm not making a case that everybody invests a lot of money in Bitcoin. I'm just starting to see the case for it being digital gold, and those that have the most wealth eventually are going to want some Bitcoin. And the way Bitcoin shakes out with the total number that will ever exist, I think it's 21 million, not even every millionaire who lives on this planet now will be able to buy one, meaning there's more than 21 million millionaires.
Right. So let's go back to what you said by them suppressing the price. And you have to understand, look, I'm not saying that they can't magically come up with something, but over 4,800 times historically, and I'm not talking way history, I'm talking even recent history, when they do a revaluation and a reset of the system, they take an intangible fiat money that has no intrinsic value because it's only used in one place. It's used in the financial system. And they value it against good money gold that has full, the buyer base. I cannot stress how important, you want a whole lot of buyers when you want to sell something. So they revalue that against. That's when gold goes somewhere near its true value, its fundamental value. That's when they stop suppressing it, because they actually need it to go to those highs, to finish off the fiat currency, to finish off the debt, so the slate is wiped clean and we can start again.
Yeah, you and I are really on the same page here. I'm really glad we went here, because think about this. We've talked about this so many times in the past. So when the liquidity dries up for a $2,000 priced share of Amazon, and there are no buyers, what happens to that market? It literally could crash just like it did in 2000, 2001 when Amazon fell back down to below $10 a share. So my point here on Bitcoin is not that I'm a Bitcoin bull. It's that I'm starting to see how Bitcoin could easily be $100,000 per Bitcoin in the future, because when these markets collapse, people are going to want to get into something that is holding value or possibly going up in value as the markets collapse. And so that's the only case I'm making for cryptocurrencies, the good ones like Litecoin and Bitcoin, Ethereum, some of them that are out there. They may actually attract some of these trillions of dollars.
Well, they may. The problem is whether or not those trillions of dollars will have any value when they do.
Right.
Okay, that's really, and you and I love our discussions. I think people need to hear what we're talking about today, even though we may disagree in this area. We've got to have these healthy discussions so that people can make educated choices and can do what is in their best interest first. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't agree with me, but I'm going to put it out there and I'm going to tell you what I think, and I'm going to show you why I think it, and then you can make up your own mind. I mean, that's what you do all the time so well, and why I love our conversation so much.
Well, thanks. And I'm glad we went here too. And we'll talk about this stuff in the future, because there's no reason to ignore these cryptocurrencies like they don't exist, because clearly, again, with a 10-year history, it's worth talking about. And the other thing I want to just bring up quickly is people ask me all the time, where do I buy silver and gold? Where do you buy yours? Of course, you know this. One of my sponsors is SD Bullion, and they're great. I recommend them highly if you want to get 100 ounces of silver or 5 ounces of gold They're terrific, sdbullion.com. However, they don't specialize in the numismatic coins that you were talking about. And I want people to understand, when you're talking about highly, highly, highly valued, very rare gold sovereign coins, gold eagles, double gold eagles, there are a lot of charlatans out there that can take advantage of people who don't know any better. And they're going to sell you a coin many times over spot price as a premium. So you really have to be careful who you work with. And I know you guys can specialize in helping people understand the ins and outs of numismatics over there at ITM, right?
Absolutely. We are so keen on education, and really what makes us, and everything you said is accurate, although I don't necessarily think people need to carry around $1 million coins. However, what we really do, I've studied currencies since 1987. And again, I'm all about patterns. I want to see these patterns, and when I see that they repeat, then that gives me a lot of insight into where we are and where we're headed. And so what I've done is, based upon all of that studies, I created a strategy for myself to help me thrive and through the reset. That it's inevitable. We have to do it. They don't have any tools left. The system, all they have is money printing. And when they lop off those zeros, by the way, I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow on the piece that I sent you from. You see the markets go from here, they lop off zeros, they go to nothing. So really good points on that, but we have a strategy, and that's really what we specialize in, working with clients, supporting their goals, their circumstances, and what they have to work with. So that comes first before you even say, well, you know, you need to do this, or you need to do that, or you need to do the other thing. It's customized to each individual. That's really where we shine.
Yeah. All right.
Education.
Yeah, absolutely. And education is absolutely key. And that's, you know, again, I really appreciated this conversation, because we're going to not agree on everything, but I think at this point, everything has to be on the table, because Peter Schiff is talking his book about gold. I get that. He owns a gold and silver company or gold company, and that's great, right? I think we all talk our books sometimes as it pertains to these things. But those of us who have owned just silver for so long and some gold have been punished by the manipulation. You know, meanwhile,
and they get discouraged,
right.
Which, keep in mind, Sean, that's what they want. They want you to be discouraged and go, you know, I've sat on this for so long and it hasn't done anything or hasn't gone up, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to go ahead and do something else. And right when you have most people going, I'm going to go ahead and do something else, that's when you really need to be in the gold and silver. I know this is a huge bargain, both physical gold and physical silver, with all the utility that they have, are severely undervalued from those suppressions. You see central banks buying it hand over fist. Me too. I take advantage of this because I'm very patient. But having said all that, food, water, energy, security, community, shelter, and then the silver particularly, although gold as well, for barterability, to make sure that whenever that currency's value is, when you need to convert it into a pint of strawberries, you're going to hold the value over here, and instead of it taking, you know, $1, maybe it takes a dime. You see what I'm saying? So you need to hold that value and convert it as you need it. That's one of the challenges that I have with stocks or with anything like cryptocurrencies, is that you have no protection against the inflation, other than maybe people betting that up. But 1,000,000,000,000 times zero is always zero.
Right. All right. Well, we'll continue to keep our eye on all of these markets, and we'll continue to discuss all of these topics, including Bitcoin, Litecoin, and the others, because I'm just convinced at this point, after a 10-year track record, Bitcoin is something that really must be talked about, because I just don't think it's going to zero anytime soon. And I wonder if it hits 100,000 before it hits zero. That's really the flip of the coin, right? Is it going to zero? Is it going to 100,000, or is it going to 20,000? Is it a store of value? Is it a way to get money out of this country and take money with you anywhere on earth outside of government regulation and government eyes? That is the case base for it. And boy, I'm not even a Bitcoin bull. I'm not sure how we went there. I'm not sure how I got so lodged onto this part of our topic, but this part of our
Well, because you know what? When you and I get going on a topic, it's always fun.
It is fun. All right, Lynette, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Always. My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And guys, thank you so much. If you're still with us at this point, give it a like, would you? Spread this information within your sphere of influence on social media. And for real news, please visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda and Mockingbird mainstream media lies. Much love, guys. Bye-bye.
I think the ancients knew a lot more about where we are than we do now because we've been lied to so much. If there's any truth to what I've discovered and what I'm presenting, then it shakes the foundations of a number of ologies.